Welcome to Unfiltered, real conversations with creators, tastemakers, movers, and shakers. I'm Kristen Hess of the Artful Gourmet podcast, and this is where we pull back the curtain on creativity, business, and the stories behind the people shaping culture today. So grab a coffee or pour a glass of wine, and let's sit down and talk. This is Unfiltered. Hey, everybody, I'm Kristen Hess. Welcome back to Unfiltered on the Artful Gourmet podcast. Today, we have a really special guest and someone I'm really excited to introduce to you. His name is Cam Knight. He has authored over 12 books. He's got some amazing insights and advice on memory and internal resistance, which we're going to be talking about. He's traveled over 100 countries, and he's got a lot of cool advice with this new program that we're going to talk about today. But he basically is going to be here to tell you all about that and some of the books that he's written. And I just wanted to welcome you, Cam, to the podcast today. And
Okay.
let's just talk a little bit about you and what you do, where you got started. I know you have an amazing journey. You've been all over the place and you've written a lot of really cool books. And you have this new program coming out. So let's talk about you. Welcome, Cam.
Thank you very much for that awesome introduction. I'm really happy to be here and thank you for having me on. My name is Cam Knight and I'm a coach, international speaker, and author of a dozen books, many of which you see behind me in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance. And now I talk about a concept that was always on my mind, and it's called internal resistance. And it answers a question I had for years and decades. And that is, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. Now, at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answer I came across was motivation and discipline, or that I had limiting beliefs. And yes, motivation, discipline, and beliefs are all part of the equation, but they're a much smaller piece to the bigger puzzle. And over the last 15 years, that question always lingered in my mind. Every time I was stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want? And the more coaching I did, seminars I attended, and books I read, the more I learned about the complexities of the human brain. And over time, unknown to me, my unconscious was taking in and processing all of this information. And one day out of nowhere, I had this epiphany or aha moment. And I was like, wait a minute, there's a part of our mind designed to hold us back. There's a part of our brain built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I know, a lot of times you talk a lot about, your internal brain, the way we
Yeah,
speak to ourselves and things like that, right? And how we say we want to do something, but then we put it off. So, it's sort of this behind the scenes psychology going on. And,
yeah,
I just moved from Texas to New York and I knew I had a whole month to pack and,
yeah.
and get ready. But I procrastinated and waited until the last minute to get that all done. So, why do we procrastinate and how does that come about? And
Sure.
how does this whole internal resistance
Yeah, so this
contribute to
is
that?
a this is a very good question. So the part of the mind that creates wants and desires works separately from the part that actually allows us to act on that desire. Now, this is very key, so I'll say it again. The part of the mind that creates want works independent of the part that actually allows us to act on that want. So we have one part of the brain creating wants and desires, and in many ways, it's creating endless wants one after another. It was never designed or meant to see if a want was worth pursuing or going after. Its only job is to create wants. And in many ways, it's going on a rampage, creating all sorts of wants. And then we have another part of the brain that is designed to see if that want is worth going after and pursuing. And this is the part that gives a green light. And if it doesn't give the green light, we can't act. So, what's really important to understand here is that one brain can both create a desire for something and at the same time keep us from going after it.
Mm.
In fact, for a long time, I used to think whoever created humanity, whether it was God, aliens, or evolution, must have been really sick and twisted because how could they do this to us? How
Right.
could they create these burning desires and then keep us from going after it and then having to deal with the pain of not being able to achieve it? Though when you look at it from this perspective, a model, it makes much more sense where we want to do this thing, but our own self is stopping us and we're not able to do it.
Mm.
So to give your example, you had a whole month to pack, to move, and so you had this desire to do that, but there was a part of you that was making you procrastinate. And that part is what I would call resistance. And we can kind of dive deeper into how it works and what's going on and kind of unpack maybe why you had procrastinated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, off the top of my head, everybody knows moving is probably one of the worst things on the planet to
Yeah.
do. It's like, you have to do it. It's kind of like taxes, right? Taxes and death.
Yeah.
Moving, they're kind of all on the same plane.
Yeah.
Like something that's inevitable we have to do, but we don't want to do it. So we find other things to do that make us happy instead of doing the thing that we know we need to do that's not going to make us happy and probably miserable. So, there's probably different things like procrastinating something good versus procrastinating something bad. Are
Yeah.
those different parts of the brain or are they the same part of the
It's
brain?
the same thing. So we have
Okay.
one part that's creating a desire, and then another part that checks and evaluates a desire to see if it's worth doing or going after.
Mm.
Now, how this plays out is so the part of the brain that checks to see if a decision is something we should pursue, it does so by going through a whole host of criteria. And if the decision, desire, course of action, or the thing that we're wanting is not in line with any of the criteria, it will prevent action.
Mm.
So it helps to think about standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every decision that comes up must go through them. And if even one of the members is against the idea, it will not pass. And so, what's really important to understand here is that being able to do something has nothing, I wouldn't say nothing, but a lot less to do with motivation and drive than actually understanding the resistance.
Mm.
And so, what's even more is that both parts can actually get in the way. The part of the mind that creates wants and desires can get in the way, as well as obviously resistance. And so the question that really becomes is what are the criteria? What is a checklist that resistance goes through? Well, it's actually quite involved. In my work, I found there's a good 2 to 3 dozen items that resistance will go through to decide if we should do something. And I'll
Hmm.
list off a few of them really quickly, and then we can go
Sure.
deeper into either one or talk about some other types of resistance. So the first comes down to beliefs. If we don't believe something is possible, of course, resistance will stop us. And beliefs come down into two forms. If we think something's not possible for us or not possible in general, meaning we might think something is possible, we could see other people doing it, but then we might not think it's possible for us. And this is like the core belief that is very deep in us that we don't even realize.
Mm.
And even though we might start something thinking something is possible, this core belief will slow progress or stop us from making progress. And
Okay.
then another one is habit. So we are made up of life forms so small that they can't be seen with the naked eye. Billions of molecules come together to form the cells, tissues, muscles, organs, the systems in your body to make up you. And it took years for all those cells, tissues, muscles, organs, and systems to line up the way you are. And that's what habits are. All the individual parts of you lining up for a particular task, behavior, or a particular way of seeing, thinking, and doing things. And that can't be changed easily. All the individual parts of you, down to the very cells, have to rearrange and realign themselves for their new behavior.
Mm.
So if we're trying to do something that goes against habits or we haven't built a habit for, it's just going to be difficult to do. It doesn't matter how easy it is or how much we think we should be able to do it. If the habit's not there, resistance will come up. And then there's things like comfort zone. Some people's brain, the way it's wired, it likes the familiar over the unfamiliar.
Hmm.
And by doing anything new or going after a goal, it means moving out of our comfort zone. And for people's brains who like the familiar, that's going to create resistance. And so these are some of the more commonly known, talked about things that get talked about,
Hmm.
but they're more deeper stuff, like things like self image. For example, if I have a self image that I am really studious or I'm really intelligent, I might have resistance to doing a particular task or activity or goal because if things don't go well, I'll have to face the fact that I'm not as studious or smart as I think I am. And so sometimes the brain will create resistance to doing something or it'll prevent us from doing something so we can hold on to that self image and not do anything that'll prove it wrong.
Mm.
But it goes even deeper than that. It goes into things like core needs. And this is an interesting one that doesn't get talked about, but I think a lot of people listening here would resonate. So we humans are built with all sorts of needs, like the need for love, attention, affection, as well
Hmm.
as physical contact. And some of these needs are deeply ingrained into us, like the need for a mother's love or a father's guidance. And when we don't receive these needs, it creates pain, a lot of pain, the kind of pain that can make a person go crazy. That's how deeply ingrained these needs are. Now, if a person grows up and these needs are not met and their brain learns these needs can't be met, won't be met, or is too dangerous to be met, it feels it'll prevent us from going after that need. And that makes sense, right? But because these are core needs, the needs don't go away, they get louder and stronger. But
Right.
since the brain or resistance feels these needs can't be met, it feels it has no other choice but to distract us from that pain. And there's many ways it will distract us. And one of them is by making us procrastinate, by sabotaging us and making our lives difficult. So our focus is always on problems and not this pain.
Mm.
And so this is how, deep resistance can go. So maybe to unpack what was going on for you, moving, you had a month to move. Maybe there's a part of your brain that liked the familiar. It didn't want to go into something new. And so it kept procrastinating by keeping you from doing the things that could help you make you move. So it could stay in the familiar and kind of keep you in it.
Right.
Maybe it came from beliefs that life needs to be a little bit hectic. I can't say what your upbringing was like, but I suspect there was a bit of excitement. And when
Yeah.
we get caught in that, we recreate it. And one of the easiest ways the brain recreates excitement or intensity in our lives is by making us procrastinate until the last minute, where it's just like this surge
Right.
of like, I got to do all this right now,
Yeah.
and I can't focus. And
It's sort of like this rush. I was telling my friend who was amazing and she came over and helped me for that whole week. I mean, we were working like 12-hour days,
yeah,
throwing stuff out, cleaning, and it was this big crazy thing, but also the excitement of moving, that part was there.
yeah,
But, just putting off the pain of actually packing and cleaning. But at least I had a friend and we made it fun by doing
yeah,
it together, you know what I mean? But I was telling her, like, when I was in college, I would do the same thing. I would wait exams, right?
yeah,
I would wait until the last minute. I had this art history class and I had to memorize all these slides and all these things. I would stay up till 3 in the morning,
yeah,
but the last week, right before my exams, and I would do fine. But, I had plenty of time to study, but I was like,
yeah,
nah, I'm not going to do that. But it was that rush of like, okay, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to get it done. And I tend to do that. Like, I get things done when I
yeah,
procrastinate because you got to get it done in a short amount of time. So
yeah.
it's
So
interesting.
this would validate the resistance from habit.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, habits are all the individual parts of us down to the very cells lining up for particular behavior.
Right.
And the way you're talking, you've done this so much since all the way back in school that has become habituated.
Right.
So even though you can have all the time in the world, and even though people can give you all the motivation and whatever, because you're habituated to waiting for the last minute, resistance is going to continue having you wait until the last minute to do
Right.
things because that's what you become habituated to do. In
Right.
fact, if you don't mind me bringing up, our starting of this podcast may have been a bit of that.
Well, I mean, honestly, I was using my laptop the
Yeah,
last time I was talking to somebody, but it was in Texas. So I haven't done a podcast since I moved here on Sunday. So I'm also thinking, you know what? I was doing a podcast through my Substack the other day. That tab actually may have still been open,
Uh,
which is maybe why it was blocking because it was trying to use the camera somewhere else. But yes. And I also had my mom and her friend here. I'm like, you guys, I've got a podcast in 15 minutes. You got to get out of here. You know what I mean? So, yeah, of course,
yeah.
we
And,
probably should have done the little 10-minute check in, right?
and I hope you don't mind me bringing it up, but I just
No,
thought
no,
this would be
no, it's
something
all
good.
good. There's always something technical, but again, I didn't know I was gonna have an issue because it worked the last time I used it about a week or so ago. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of this like rush, right? Okay, I gotta get everything done. I gotta get it all done. But, sometimes it would be better to do it over time, but then you don't feel as motivated or like fear of loss. I gotta get this done. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, do you think different people have different habits then? I mean, are there certain people that probably procrastinate more than others? Is it a personality thing, do you think?
I think a lot of what we're doing is driven by resistance,
Mm,
meaning people who have a tendency to wait until the last minute, it's not because they're choosing to. They're not saying, oh, I want to wait until the last minute where things become a little bit too overwhelming or there's a lot of intense emotions, so I could do it. Most
right.
people have that intention of starting earlier, but they don't because resistance won't allow them.
Yeah.
It only kicks in the very last minute because now it is dire and it needs to be done. And so, in a way, resistance lets up so we can do that thing.
Yeah.
And even our personality, I think a lot of our personality, who we are and what we do, what we're doing in life, the types of people we're hanging around with, they're all, I think, run by resistance. And I'll give a pretty good example. So, another reason for resistance, remember I talked about the checklist and I said there is beliefs, habits, comfort zones, self image,
Mm,
core pains. Well, people can also be a reason for that, for why we have resistance. And what I mean by that is that we humans are pack animals. We evolved to live and survive in a pack. So
right.
much of our neurology evolved to make sure we stay in the pack. And as a result, we evolved with various characteristics to make sure we are staying in the pack. And one of them is we become very sensitive to the thoughts, judgments, and actions and reactions of other people.
Mm,
And the more sensitive a person is, the more they are affected by the thoughts, judgments, and actions and reactions of others. And that influences so much of what they do. The types of
interesting.
people they hang around, the types of jobs they choose. They're obviously not going to pick jobs where they have to present and be on stage because they're so affected by the thoughts and judgments of others,
Right.
and they're not going to be hanging around people who might be a lot more critical and, let's just say, free in their thinking because they can be so sensitive. So
Right.
the people they're picking, the jobs they're taking, the things that they're doing. In fact, some people are so sensitive to being around others that they can't go to the gym and work out. I know it's kind of crazy for some of us who go to the gym and enjoy
Yeah.
going to the gym. For them, the thought of others seeing them working out is too much, or the
Yeah.
thought of seeing others, seeing them not know how to work out, or the fact that they're not healthy. There's too much going on internally. So their brain creates resistance to exercise and working out simply because it would mean being around people and they're so
Yeah.
sensitive to people, it prevents that particular activity and behavior.
Yeah. I actually have a good friend, she's been my friend since I was like 12 and super sensitive and artistic, very creative.
Yeah.
But she doesn't really like to be around a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like if the girls, we had like a group of girls in Atlanta, we would all get together. She couldn't handle all of us being together. It was like one or two of us
Yeah.
together at her place. She could deal with it. But it's like she can't handle all those people. It's just something going on because she is so sensitive. I think that noise and commotion just
Yeah.
affects her. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And I never
Yeah.
understood that because I'm a very outgoing person. And I always felt like, hey, the more the merrier. And I'm bringing people together.
No.
And I love her, but I'm like, why doesn't she want to have a group? She just can't deal with it. So
Yeah.
is that
And
kind of what you're talking about there? Like,
100%. So she
yeah,
has resistance to hanging out with you guys or going out and doing things.
can't handle.
Yeah, and I
All the
sus
people and the talking and all of that.
yeah, and I suspect that's playing out in other goals and aspirations she may have. And she's likely shutting down a lot of things she could be doing
Mm,
because it means she may have to be around people.
right.
And so obviously she's not going to be an entrepreneur because entrepreneur, you have to be around people. You can't be
Yeah.
successful as an entrepreneur. You can be successful as an accountant, go into work, do your job, come home, and that's
Yes.
fine,
Yeah.
but not as an entrepreneur. So
Right.
it's making a lot of decisions already for her.
Mm,
And the commotion you're saying in her head, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's not that being around people creates that commotion. It's that there's something going on internally where resistance creates that commotion.
mm.
So she avoids the people. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah,
So
totally.
resistance has many ways of stopping us. And this would be a good way to talk about what I call the tricks of resistance. Is that okay if I go into
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Sure.
So if a resistance stops us from doing something, it doesn't tell us it's stopping us. It doesn't say, hey, Kristen, you know this task of packing for your trip? Well, because of your habits and some of your things from the past, well, I can't let you do it or I can't let you start now. We're going to wait until the last minute.
Yeah.
That's not what resistance does. It manifests in other ways. And resistance has all sorts of what I call tricks to keep us from doing things. And some of the tricks are obvious, like television, social media, video games, maybe even drinking, smoking, getting high. And I say those things are obvious because when we're doing them, we know we should be doing something different. But there's other tricks that are not so obvious. And there can be things like over planning. A person can get into a heightened sense of planning everything that they need to do, how to do it, and the best way to do it. And all the time they spend on planning is time they're not actually spending on the actual
Doing
activity.
it. Exactly.
And so they're not actually making results and the tricks win. So it's a lot more sly. It can
Yeah.
also come down to perfectionism. A lot of people will spend all their time dotting their I's and crossing their T's to make sure everything is perfect. And all that time they spend on perfecting, it's time they're not putting that work or thing out there. And so it gives the illusion of progress when we're actually avoiding. So
Right.
in this case, I would say for your friend, and this is my quack psychology, so I don't want to say what is or isn't,
Yeah.
is resistance says people, for her, I think people equals danger, or people is not something you want to be around. And so just the thought of being around people would trigger all this noise where it's
Yeah.
so unpleasant, where she just goes, nope, I can't do that. I'm going to stay in, just be around a few people.
Yeah.
And now this trick wins because she's doing exactly what resistance wanted her to do.
Right.
But these tricks go deep. I mean, they can go into things like criticizing. And this is a really interesting one. Have you ever seen something or someone and kind of criticize it like, I can't believe that person doing that, or I would never want that, things like that?
I'm sure. Well, maybe internally, maybe never said anything, but I
Yeah.
mean, we all probably judge here and there, even though we don't want to.
Yeah.
Internally, we're thinking, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I would never do that. Right.
Yeah.
Or why is
Well,
that person doing that way?
exactly. Well,
Yeah.
we all do it. And usually when we criticize is because we want that thing. We don't criticize things we don't want.
Interesting.
Yeah, we usually criticize things we deep down want, but resistance doesn't want us to go after it for one reason or another.
Yeah.
So it'll criticize it, make negative remarks about it, or put it down. And as soon as it does, we put a mental barrier of not going in that direction, and resistance wins in keeping us from going in that direction.
Yeah.
So I will like to have, your audience think about whenever they're criticizing to be open to the possibility that there's a good chance that they want that thing. But for one reason or another, they're being stopped from going after it by themselves or they're doing it themselves.
Yeah.
In fact, these tricks are so deep. I say that anything that is keeping you from moving the needle forward is a trick. And that could even include getting into an accident or getting sick. And here's why. When we get into an accident, it takes our attention away in dealing with and resolving that accident. And all that time and energy we put into resolving that is time and energy we can't put into moving forward.
Mm,
And the same thing when we get sick. When we get sick, it drains all our entire energy. Like we can't even do anything.
right.
And when we can't do anything, we can't do the thing to make the progress on our goals, tasks, activities, and all of that. And usually the accident and the sickness usually come as a last-ditch effort, meaning the person was making pretty good progress. They were like right on the cusp of the next plateau or getting to the finish, and boom, something happens. And I
Yeah.
see this happen over and over again with people all the time.
Yeah.
They're on the cusp of something and some
It's
life
like
event.
you're sabotaging yourself without knowing it, right? By getting into an accident or getting sick.
Yeah. So that's why I call it
Yeah.
procrastination sabotage. They're kind of
You
the
know,
same
what's
thing.
interesting too, I think about like, throughout my career, I've had several different jobs and versions of my career, from doing sales to graphic design to advertising to what I'm doing now and now the podcast. But one of my first jobs was sales and I had moved to Atlanta. I wanted to get a job so I could move. I was right out of college and I was like 21, 22. And I wanted to move to New York City, but I didn't really have any experience. So I wasn't getting job offers there. So a friend of mine was like, hey, come to Atlanta. I've got a great place. You can stay with me. Well, my parents are like, that's fine. You can move, but you need a job. You can't just move somewhere without a job. So I took this job doing sales, but it was like door to door direct sales. And I was actually really good at it. But there were days where I didn't make any sales or people were nasty. And after about 4 years of doing this, I was like so over it. And I would do that. I would be like, oh, I'm sick today and go home and just lay there. Like I didn't want to go to work, but I almost made myself sick
Yeah.
because I didn't want to do the job anymore, but I was afraid to tell my boss that I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
like this crazy thing. Like, why didn't I just quit? I mean,
Yeah.
30 years later, I would just say, look, dude, it's not for me anymore. Like,
Yeah.
now I would do that. But back then, I would, pretend or make myself sick so I didn't have to go do this job because it was like I was over it. So,
It's kind of crazy how it.
right? We make these things up, but
Yeah.
it's, again,
And
well,
I suspect the
why do you think
reason you didn't
people
want to
still
tell
do
you.
things they don't want to do? Like for example, there might be a lot of my audience, hey, they want to start a business, but they're still working a 9 to 5 because it's cushy and it's comfy and why not? But, what makes them not just say, hey, you know what? I'm over this. I want to start this business. Is it what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's 100%. And I would say it's not them saying it. It's internal resistance stopping
It's
it.
their brain.
Yeah. So like they want to do the thing, like I said, they have the want and desire
Yeah.
to leave that job, but then resistance is saying no, and it's just keeping them in them.
Mm,
And even though it's annoying and painful and they want to move forward, they can't because resistance is stopping them.
yeah.
And again, the reasons can be multifaceted. It could be like you, where the person doesn't have the guts, I guess, to tell their boss that they want to leave.
Yeah.
So this is where the people aspect of
People pleasing.
resistance is coming up,
Yes.
meaning they're sensitive to what the boss is going to think. So they rather please the boss than try to do anything that might trigger negative thoughts and judgments. So that
Yeah.
keeps them in there. Then
Right.
we can go back to the comfort zone. Having a job and we're making good money, it's comfortable.
Right.
Leaving to do our own thing, it puts us out of our comfort, and resistance is going to prefer comfort, even if it's painful, depending on certain types of personalities and keeping them from moving forward. And then there's other criterias too that I haven't gone into, but more or less that's what's going on here.
Yeah. That's interesting. So let me ask you a question. I know you've written how many books? At least a dozen,
Yeah,
right?
about a dozen books. Yeah.
And I was reading a little bit about you and your history. You started out by taking the CPA exam, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
what started this whole thing. Were you an accountant for a while before you got into writing?
Yeah.
Or were
So
you?
sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, no, that's okay. I'm just curious, like how you got into what you're doing now and like started writing books and how you do your research. I mean, it's very
Yeah.
cool that you got into this. I'm just curious how you got into it and how you do your research and
So
got
it's
into writing and have become a successful author because I think that's something that maybe a lot of people would want to do too is be a writer or start doing their own research and writing books on whatever topic, but they're don't know how to get into it, right? Because
yeah.
it's like you don't just wake up one day and become a writer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, more or less. So I was an accountant, and at a certain point, I had an itch to write. It was
Mm,
an overpowering itch, one I couldn't resist it. I don't know where this itch came from because I was never a writer. I didn't like writing. In fact, I sucked at writing.
yeah.
In school, what came natural to me was math and science, and I really enjoyed those subjects, which is
Mm,
why I became an accountant. But the writing English classes I did pretty bad in and took a lot of work to write, but it was an overpowering itch, one that I followed.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of resistance to making that transition. And my first book took over 2 years to write.
Mm,
And once I finished it, I didn't end up publishing it. In fact, I was so embarrassed by it, I never talked about it. And I went over 10 years, almost blocking it from my memory that I even wrote that book.
okay.
So I had a lot of resistance. And the reason it took me 2 years to write that book, it shouldn't have taken 2 years. But the reason is because I had so much resistance and I wasn't even aware of it, that resistance was slowing my progress.
Okay.
And one of the way it would do that, it was trying to make everything so perfect. I would spend
Yeah.
over an hour per paragraph.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I wouldn't even end up using that paragraph or would move it along. And there was other ways resistance was slowing my progress.
Yeah.
And even though I pushed through and finished the book, resistance still didn't want me to become an author, that it kept me from actually publishing my book to the point where I put it out of my mind.
Right.
Luckily, at the time, Amazon came out with direct publishing where a person didn't need to go through a publisher to get a
Yeah.
book published. And so I took that book and I took a few chapters from it and I expanded it out into their own mini books.
Oh,
And I
okay.
just threw it up there and I actually got some really good feedback.
That's
And
great.
so that gave me confidence that I knew what I was doing
Yeah.
or I had something worthwhile to say. But obviously, it was more about people would like what I had to say.
Yeah.
So I continued doing it. I started writing more. And as I grew and learned more, my books expanded and grew as well. So it was really cool because the way Amazon allowed it, because if I went through a traditional publisher, I would have had to have a certain number of pages. I would
Right.
have had a certain audience and all of that. The way Amazon the opportunity they gave is you can write about just about anything. It could be as long as you want. And back then, my stuff wasn't even edited, so there was typos and things like that. And they still published it. And again, as I was growing, my books grew. Now,
Yeah.
in
That's
terms of the research, I talked about how when I was asking that question, why is it when I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it? And the best answers I came across were beliefs and motivation and discipline. I made a commitment not to put as much effort on what was being said as much as what I was actually going out and doing. And I
okay.
wanted to actually come from me pushing myself and my limits and really understanding resistance from that angle. It's one of the reasons I've traveled to over 100 countries and done all sorts of activities like skydiving, snowboarding, scuba diving, dance, yoga. I mean, I've pushed my limits and done some pretty out
Yeah,
there
you
stuff.
have done a lot. I know. I was looking at your
Yeah,
bio,
like
which we'll
hiking.
link your website and all that cool stuff at the bottom,
Yeah.
and show notes for everybody to check out. But
Yeah, like hiking the ice sheets in
that's great.
Greenland, the tallest mountain range in Africa, sleeping in the oldest rainforest in both Australia and Asia. Like some really, I really, really pushed it to kind of understand really what resistance is and why it's holding me back.
Yeah.
And so that was, I like to say that that was more of my research than it was just reading the traditional stuff because I'll be honest, it didn't work for me. It pumped me with a lot of motivation and inspiration, and I would get really fired up to make a big change in my life. And as soon as it was time to get started, that I couldn't move, like I was almost paralyzed,
Yeah.
or that motivation and inspiration ended up fading, and then I was back to where I started.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those people too. Like I've moved a lot from, New York to South Carolina to New York to Atlanta to Texas. But I like change. And I feel like, like you're talking about getting excited and trying out these things. Do you think part of that is like the adventure gives us that rush of something new? Because I know me, I get bored after a certain amount of time doing the same thing. That's why I'm not really good at a corporate 9 to 5 job.
Yeah,
And every time I've tried to do it, I end up going back and doing this is the third time I've started my business again
yeah,
because I don't know, it's just like the monotony of doing the same thing over and over. I can't deal with it. But again, then there's those people that they like that comfort and security. So that's why I wonder, I know it's an innate thing with everybody, but are there some people that may be more resistant than others? Or do you think we all have the same amount and it's boils down to like personality or our experiences or our temperament?
Yeah, so
I
I
don't know.
think, as I mentioned, a lot of our personality is defined by resistance. So when we
Mm-hmm.
could say, oh, well, that's his personality, that doesn't really give much indication of what that actually means. It's really the resistance that's driving that personality. And earlier, I kind of talked about how that plays out.
Yeah.
And then earlier, I also said that both our wants and our resistance can create challenges. And we can go into a whole discussion on our wants. And I'll just talk about one of them, and that's the overactive want.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, well, before I go into it, I want to remind the part of the brain that creates wants is unrestrained. So it's creating wants one after another. And before we can even finish one desire, the brain is creating other wants to chase. In fact, before we can even start on one want for a lot of people, their brain is creating other wants to chase. And so if a person has an overactive wanting mechanism, they're naturally going to exhibit the personality or the traits that you're talking about. Doing something for a little bit and then jumping to another and jumping to another. And we can say that's kind of the way their brain is wired. But it can also be how resistance manifests. Remember, I had said that when resistance stops us from doing something, it doesn't tell us that it's stopping us, it uses tricks. Well, one of the tricks is by jumping from one want to another. Because as long as we jump from one want to another, we don't make progress on any specific task, activity, or goal. And because we don't make progress or go deep into any of them, the tricks of resistance win in keeping us moving forward. So I don't want to get too much into you, but
Yeah,
I'll
no.
say, but
Yeah, we don't need to talk about dissect my life, but
but
no, I think it's interesting, and I think everybody probably has certain proclivity to changing a lot or not changing a lot. But I was just
yeah,
curious, if personality or temperament was tied to that, or if it was just different brains being wired differently.
yeah. But I mean, I would say if I were to dissect you a little bit, I would say there's some resistance going on that is that you're not aware of, unconscious, that is
Yeah.
making you go from one thing to another and not stick with something long enough to see like really major, deep, massive progress in it. And there's many indicators of why I would say that, but one of them is you're saying you're starting this for the third time. It's usually a telltale sign of resistance.
Yeah. Well, and of course, like we were talking about earlier, I mean, having a business and being self employed and freelance, it's not always easy. And there's going to be
No,
months that are really busy. And then there's months that are kind of slow. And so any of the times I went back to the corporate world was like, oh, I'm having a slow month. One of them was during COVID. Tail end, it was a
yeah,
little slow. And that was why I took that full-time job in Texas, which in the beginning was fun. But then after a couple of years, I'm like, oh, I miss my business. I like
yeah,
having that independence. But it was like a safe place to go for some, health benefits,
yeah,
whatever. And it was okay, full time. I get paid every week. But then and I did it in New York too. Like I left my job, I started my business, I was doing well, had a slow period. But then I took like a contract art buyer job at a big agency. And after a few months, I hated it. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Why am I doing this? And it was only because I thought having the safety of a full time job would make my life better. But then I was miserable. And I'm
yeah,
sure there's a lot of people that do this in other ways. It may not even be job related. You might go back to a relationship or a habit that we know is not good for us or that we don't want to do, but we still go back to it because it's habit or comfortable. But, I talk about that a lot in my podcast too, just not settling and taking risks because if you just settle for what's easy and comfortable, you're not going to be happy. And I mean, I know at least for me, you end up going back to this is what I really want to do. And you have to be able to tough it out when you have the slow months or you're not getting as
yeah,
much business as you normally do because you know that you're going to have a big win or a bunch of wins next month. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So I don't know if having, being an entrepreneur is for everybody. I don't think it is, but I know for me it is. And probably for you it is because I like being independent and I like working on different projects and clients and traveling but that's just me. So I'm sure that some of my listeners though can probably relate to both sides.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So yeah, I mean, at one point you said, sticking it out when the month got slow, that could have been an option, for you to stick it out
Right.
But then resistance may have been like, no, we need to go on to the next thing. And
Yeah,
you got the 9 to 5. So resistance plays out in very sneaky
it
and
does.
very interesting ways. So
It really
I do
does.
like to help people point that out because we think a lot of times we think we're making the decisions that we are, but it's usually something going on internally that's deciding for us
Right.
and convincing us that we actually made a decision when it was something unconscious.
Right. Right. So, I know we're getting a little bit close to the end. I'd love for you, maybe besides your books, where they can find your books on your website
Yep.
and on Amazon, correct?
Yep.
And then the coaching program for the internal resistance. We will post a link below. I will for the my listeners, and there is a special discount, right? Do you want to tell
Yep.
them what that is?
Yeah, so I have a program called Conquer Internal Resistance, and it's a program that I spent years putting together, and people have really enjoyed because it goes really deep into why we're not able to do what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what we just discussed here just scratches the surface of resistance.
Yeah.
We talked about maybe 5 or 6 criteria of why resistance holds us back, but this program goes into even more. And we talked about maybe 3 or 4 tricks of resistance. This program goes into dozens of tricks. And we didn't really get into talking about how our own wants can create challenges for us. And this program goes really deep into that. But more
Yeah.
importantly, it gives very simple and actionable tips that people can use to push past resistance. The program, we're offering a 20% discount for everyone listening here. So
Mm-hmm.
they can enter CIR20, and there's links in the description to get that program. I think it's going to be the most important program a person takes right now, especially because times are changing and the way things are moving, it's requiring us to make shifts, do things bigger, do things different. And
Right.
unless we can understand resistance, all of that will be difficult to do. But when we can understand resistance, it'll be a lot easier to move through.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I mean, it's almost like having your personal psychologist, Cam, here. I love it.
Actually, I will not to interrupt, but this part is good. I actually had one student who went through the course said he was a Marine and had a lot of PTSD and a lot of internal resistance issues. And he said this program was way better than seeing a therapist for sure. That was his
See?
exact word. So, yeah.
Well, I love it. And I mean, you're so smart and well informed. And, I would love to even get into reading all your books and stuff too. I've always been fascinated by psychology and sociology and why we do the things we do. And, that's again why on my podcast, I try to talk about things that are inspiring to other people and things that have helped me. And, we all have wants and needs and procrastination. We all have our own psychology, but I
Yeah.
think, anything that can help us move forward or like you said, just dive a little deeper into why we're doing things that we're doing or not doing can only help us in our life
Yeah.
and in our business and in our relationships and whatnot. So with that said, thank you so much, Cam. I mean, is there anything else you want to add? Like I said, I will list everything below to the program. How many weeks is the program, or is it something that people can choose to do over a certain amount of time, or is it a
Yeah.
structured certain weeks amount of time?
Yeah. Again, they can get all that information at camknight.com.
Okay.
They can get my books, the course. I've got some other materials there.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as this program, I like what you said about we have our own psychology. And that
Yes.
was another motivation for me putting this program together. Because when I was doing my inner work and going and seeing coaches and seminars, everyone was always telling me what my issue was and what I needed to do to get over it. And
Yeah.
I would listen to them and I wouldn't get the results that were promised, or they left more to be desired. And I realized if my issues are internal, why don't I just go there for the answers?
Right.
And this program is really designed specifically for each individuals because I have different techniques where people can uncover their own resistance. They'll see it, they'll see exactly what's going on. So
Yeah.
they don't have to take a bunch of advice not related to them. It'll be really specific to them. And it's a self-paced program. I'm there to support if people have
Cool.
questions, but they can go at their own pace. And what I recommend is just watch one video or one lesson per day, and within a month, you'll have the whole information internalized so you can start making the progress that you want.
Yeah, that's cool. And then so after the program, I mean, do you offer also to people one-on-one sessions as
Yes.
coaching if they want to do that, or is that part of the program, or is it more like
So the
online
program is,
modules?
yeah, the program is online, but I also
Okay.
do one-on-one work if people want to
Okay.
do a more direct and faster way to uncover their internal resistance. And that is by a technique I developed that helps me take people into their unconscious and we work on the resistance directly. It's not NLP or hypnosis, it's a method I've developed. And I've had people say things like it's like 2 years of coaching in 2 hours, or I'm not a therapist, so I
Cool.
can't say this, but this was an exact quote from one of my clients, one-on-one clients. And she said it's therapy on steroids. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Cam. And like I said, I'm going to list everything, all the links below to the books and the course and his website and all that good stuff. And, if you guys enjoyed the podcast, please leave a comment or feel free to ask questions below. We'll be sharing this online and you'll be able to come back and watch it again and reach out to Cam directly. We'll put his email on there as well. And thank you so much for joining. This was really inspirational. And I know we only scratched a little bit of the surface. So I'm excited to even just learn more myself and
Yeah.
read some more of your books and, watch some more of your videos and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed our conversation and thank you for being on the Artful Gourmet podcast today.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Again, very happy to have been here.
Yeah,
And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. This was fantastic.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure my listeners will love it and want to learn more. So, with that said, have a great day, everybody, and we will talk soon.
Thank you so much for joining me on Unfiltered today, part of the Artful Gourmet podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend, leave a rating or review, and make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Your support helps these conversations reach more listeners who are passionate about creativity, culture, and meaningful work. I'm Kristen Hess, and I'll see you next time for another great conversation right here on Unfiltered on the Artful Gourmet podcast. And remember, stay curious, stay creative, and keep living life a little unfiltered.